Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm going to be doing this in English as well, so please excuse me. My Italian is not nearly good enough to try and do this. Thank you very much, firstly, to Be Open and to Francesco Maracci for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here as part of the beginning of the Salon de Mobili. So let me tell you a little bit more about who I am and what I do. First and foremost, I'm a writer. And the image on the screen there is of the Italian version of my book, EcoFashion, or Ecomoda in Spanish and Italian. And it was a pivotal book because it was really the first book that was available that discussed eco-fashion as separate from eco-design. When I first wrote this book, eco-fashion was being lumped together in publications with product design, and so you'd get a well-designed coffee pot next to a beige, boring t-shirt with a political slogan that happened to be made in organic cotton. And I felt it was vital to elevate the discussion to a different level, a much higher level of design. Some of the other things that I do that are also quite integral to my research and my writing is I'm a blogger. This is my website, EcoFashion, where it's really an outgrowth of my book on eco-fashion, but it's continuously updated on designer overviews each week with resources at retail, at distribution, at all sorts of different levels, and a calendar of eco-fashion events. I'm also a journalist for several magazines. I'm the European editor for Coco Eco, which is an LA-based magazine, a pretty slick, standard sort of fashion magazine, but specific to eco-fashion. I'm the international features editor for Above Live. Above was a quarterly magazine, sort of coffee table magazine that was published out of Paris in France. They've since moved to New York, and this is their beta social network. So it's an ecological social network, and I write on a broader content there of including art, design, and technology. I'm also a content curator on multiple different sites. Facebook, for me, is not a place to hook up with my friends and chat about what's been going on in my day. It's a means of communication. And through Facebook, I do content curate information that includes activism, politics, culture, art, fashion, design, and textiles. Ditto for Twitter. Under a narrow content under EcoFashion hashtag and a much broader cultural and design focus under the Sass Brown hashtag. Pinterest, stumble upon, it's sort of never ending, but there's one thing that all of these mediums have in common, and that is that they are all digital. The environment of fashion and activism is completely a digital environment. All of the information is solely available, really, through the digital environment. These are just a couple of examples of some of the important mediums of communication. So I'm part of a movement, basically, and I'm part of a movement that informs and shares information about activism in fashion. In fact, a fashion activist, if you like. So why fashion? Well, fashion, first of all, and the related areas, such as textiles, crops, and so on, employs a sixth of the world's population. A sixth of the world's population. Clearly, that has major potential to be a change agent in how we do business. It's also an industry that inspires people. So the two factors make it a very important change agent. So how did I start? Obviously, I didn't wake up one day and say, okay, I want to be a fashion activist. I started basically with the book. There's a much longer history that I won't go into, but I felt with the book that it was vital that I communicated a tipping point in the development of eco-fashion. As I said, up until that point, eco-fashion had been lumped together with ecology and sustainability in design in general, and I felt that fashion in itself had reached a tipping point that it was very important to communicate, and it had reached a stage where I felt that the best of the best could be judged against the mainstream industry and not come up short. Yet at the same time, eco-fashion still had that, and still has in many people's minds, still has the design stigma of hemp pants and bags that are bought from a head shop. And I wanted to elevate the design conversation to another level. So what do I write about? Well, depends upon the medium, because with so many digital outlets, it's vital that you don't over-duplicate information. We're all on information overload in our worlds. So these are some examples of some of the postings that I do on various different sites at different times. This is just a post about the sustainable consumption within clothing. So basically, I write and tell the stories and connections we have to our world through our clothing, whether that's highlighting labor abuses, commenting on politics, technology, design, or culture. And I tell the stories around the production, the use, and the death of our clothing. But most of all, I celebrate great design, whether it's intelligent, cerebral, playful, technological, but good design. This is a chart, something I've posted on one of my sites at some stage from the National Resource Defense Council, that shows the impact of production of clothing. So from earth to dirt, from the growing of the seed, if it's a natural fiber, to the discarding of the garment at the end, with the view of, once you highlight the problems, you can identify what you can improve upon. I communicate the hidden price tag to the consumer products. This is absolutely vital. The use and the abuse of natural resources. This is a very simple infographic on embedded water content, or the water footprint of a product. That's the water that is used right from the growing stage in a natural fiber to the discarding stage of something. So, for example, a piece of paper costs about 10 litres of water. Water is, of course, one of the most important future questions for our survival, basically. One of the dirtiest things in most people's wardrobes is denim jeans, and it's something that has not been communicated effectively yet. It costs nearly 11,000 litres of water to produce a single pair of denim jeans. 11,000 litres of water. Talking about most denims made out of cotton. Cotton is a very water-hungry plant. The number of washes that a pair of jeans go through, whether in production for the deconstruction or whether by a consumer at the end of its life. 450 million pairs of jeans are sold in the US alone each year. That's a total amount of 1.4 trillion gallons of water utilized to produce denim jeans for the US market alone. Sandblasting. This is another thing I talk about, not specifically sandblasting, but highlighting important issues. This is part of a very high-profile social media campaign from Labour Behind the Label and the Clean Clothes campaign to ban the very harmful practice of sandblasting, again, denim jeans. It's a major cause of lung disease, silicosis. Turkey, as a country, has banned the practice countrywide. They're a major denim producer. The companies on the left have come under a great deal of pressure through social media, through basically Facebook and Twitter, to put them under pressure to stop sandblasting. And all the companies on the left-hand slide, Levi's, H&M, Versace, Armani, have now all agreed to stop sandblasting in their jeans. Cavalli have agreed in principle, but haven't come out with a full statement as yet. And Dolce & Gabbana outright refuse at the moment. So they're the last one to be coming under major pressure under social media, and they've been quoted as saying they have absolutely no interest in banning sandblasting in jeans. The reason Turkey banned sandblasting countrywide was because 46 sandblasting operators contracted silicosis. So the categories that I talk about eco-fashion are broken into several different areas. Ecological fabrications is probably the most obvious. So designers working with organic cotton, hemp, alpaca, soy, milk, seaweed. There are a lot of different ecological and sustainable fabrications out there. Designers that are working with fabrics that are dyed with ASIO-free dyes. ASIO is heavy metal, used in most regular dyeing processes. Designers that are working with water filtration systems. The textile industry is the second largest polluter and water user in the world. The first is agriculture. So if you think that much of our clothing is also agricultural, that makes it the largest polluter in the world. I talk about slow design, with the eradication of traditional craft skills predominantly in the West and the overexposure of global branding. This is one of the few ways going into the future that luxury brands have left to invest their product with authenticity and value. I have a very strong belief that this is the future of luxury design. Community and fair trade, obviously, although there's assumption with that you're talking about developing countries, but in actual fact, many of the most interesting models currently are actually in the developed world, and they're retraining and retaining traditional skill sets. Recycle, reuse, redesign. The fashion system is an incredibly wasteful system. It has 15% standard wastage built into every stage of the process. That's every stage from growing the fiber to cleaning the fiber to knitting or weaving it to cutting to sewing to final garments. That's an incredible amount of wastage, and that's just average. The average American throws 68 pounds of clothing and textiles away a year. And the average UK citizen throws, in fact, there are 900 million items of clothing alone thrown away in the UK per year. Textiles have also, the export of our garments has devastated the African continent's apparel industry on top of that. I talk about new models because it's absolutely vital that we discuss the changing of the systems of fashion and not just the materials that fashion is produced from. And there are a few companies that are challenging how we do business. Fashion is a very standardized, inflexible model. And so for a company to actually question these practices is really quite radical. And there are companies who are using their business and their business model to challenge the corporate mindset. Designer initiatives, because I think it's really vital that we don't just talk about designers that are working with ecological fibers or practices, but designers with a mainstream or high street that have individual initiatives that are addressing the problems in some way, shape, or form. The 3 slides up here, you probably recognize most of them. The one in the center is Livia Firth, Colin Firth's husband. She's wearing an Armani dress that was made out of recycled PET fiber. The one on the right is from H&M's third Conscious collection, made out of organic fabrics and recycled materials. And the one on the left was an exclusive for Barney's in New York from Yves Saint Laurent that worked with stockpiled and dead fabric. So these are just a few of the companies through which I tell the stories around what is happening in our industry. And there are so many stories to tell. Izzy Lane is a British designer. She actually runs a sheep sanctuary. There's much greater story here than I'm able to tell in a short period of time. But she started by saving sheep from slaughter, basically. And then that developed into her having the wool and developing a wool line and producing a collection of both knitted and woolen garments. She's actually one of the leading voices in the UK on animal welfare, and a major supporter of the British wool and textile industry. As part of the process of many of these companies has been very organic in their growth. In Izzy's case, it was much to do with understanding and finding out situations within industry. She found out that British farmers, for example, predominantly burn their wool, yet the UK imports wool from Australia and New Zealand because the British industry wasn't sustaining itself. They couldn't get a decent price for their wool product. She has a breed, as I said, of rare sheep. You don't normally think of sheep as being an endangered species, but in actual fact, some breeds are. And she specializes in saving Wensleydale and Shetland sheep. And she has a farm, an organic farm with about 600 of them on it. She also found out in this process of learning and developing her business that sheep are sent to slaughter for very minor reasons that are not their fault. They could be male, for example. They could be female and missed a pregnancy. They could be a white sheep with a black spot. They could be slightly lame, or any number of different things. And that's reason enough for a farmer to send an otherwise perfectly healthy sheep to slaughter, hence why she started the sheep sanctuary. These actually are her sheep. So there are only 1,800 Wensleydales left in the world and 3,000 Shetland. So they actually are quite endangered as far as species are concerned. This is actually another company, but it's an offshoot of Izzy's company, the North Circular. Isabel Lane is actually one of the founders of this company, but it was also founded with two models, a fashion graduate and then Izzy's yarn, and it's called the North Circular. And that company was actually set up to work from the talents of their grandmothers. They all had very talented knitting grandmothers, and they wanted to take those talents and create a very directional fashion knitwear line. So this is some of the pieces from their collection. It was originally made exclusively from Izzy sheep, but there are now more than one sheep sanctuary in the UK, so they have multiple sources for their raw material now. And part of the intent was for them to publicize and personalize the process from production to consumer, so from producer to purchaser. So part of what they do is on the hang tag of their garments, the hang tag actually bears a photograph and the name of the sheep that the wool came from. You can go onto Izzy's blog and read the daily blog from the farmer that works with the sheep. And there is a very see-through supply chain from the actual sheep they know the yarn, the wool came from, to the finished product. You can see who knitted the garment. You can read a little bio about them. So it's a very personalization of this supply chain. Alabama Channing's US designer, and she's a fabulous example of sustainable development in the developed world. She works traditionally, she works in the South, Florence, Alabama, partly hence the name of the company. Natalie Shannon is her name, so Alabama Channing is the company name. And she works with the history of the South's quilting history, so quilting circles, traditional sewing circles, and so on. She works predominantly with organic cotton and recycled T-shirts. But till you look up close at these garments, you'd have no idea that that was actually the humble origin of the textiles. These are beautiful, work-intensive pieces that have very little in common with second-hand T-shirts and organic cotton jersey. The piece that you see on here is from her bridal collection, and it's multi-layered dyed cotton with beading, cutaway work, top stitching, etc., and they're absolutely exquisite. These are pieces from her indigo dyed collection. So part of what she does is strive to preserve the fading domestic arts, as she sees it really as a preservation of our connection to our roots, to our community, and to our present. You might be able to see the close-up of the dress on the right. Her pieces are actually entirely hand-sewn, in total. Not just the beading and the embroidery or the cut work on the top, but all of the seaming, everything is done by hand, by circles of women and quilters. This is another really interesting designer I want to highlight, an Austrian company called Steinweider, who work with pre- and post-consumer waste. And the bulk of their collection is produced from a very unique source. You might not be able to tell from these slides, but when I show you the next one, you will. They're actually made from damaged factory-made sock production. So these are all made out of damaged socks. So pre-consumer socks that would never have made it to the market because they had runs or holes or the sizing was incorrect or mismatched or whatever. So you can see here that the pieces, all the fabrics are made from all of these interlocked jigsaw puzzles of socks, different textures, different sizes, but it makes a very intriguing dimensional product with the heels of the sock creating the dimensions to the garment. From somewhere, another British label, although Ursula de Castro is actually Italian. She lives with her partner in the UK. She's also the founder of Aesthetica, which is the EcoFashion trade show in the UK. Originally, and most of her collection is made out of pre-consumer waste, much of it from Italian factories, actually. She gets all of the offcuts from luxury factory manufacturers in Italy, and that is what she makes her garments from. You'll see the dress on the left, the sizes and shape of the patches of fabric are actually from what they call designer headers, which is what a mill or a weaver uses each season to show their new colors, their new patterns, etc., to designers to see what they're going to order. And then they're discarded at the end of the season. So that dress in particular was made from the leftover headers from a past season from a mill manufacturer. This is also Ursula's line from somewhere. She's been doing a really interesting collaboration with Speedo, as in swimsuit makers. I don't know how many of you remember that Speedo's LZR racer suit was banned from competitive swimming competitions a few years ago, I think 2010 if I remember. The LZR racer suit is a competitive swimmer's swimsuit. It goes from your neck to your wrist to your ankle. And when it was banned, at the time, swimmers wearing it had received 80 worldwide, had broken 80 records worldwide, and the Olympic Committee decided that it gave swimmers an unfair disadvantage over other swimmers, so they banned it. There's not much use for a competitive swimsuit that goes from neck to ankle if competitive swimmers can't wear it. So Speedo were left with thousands upon thousands of these suits, as well as the fabric with really nothing to do with it. So they actually took a rather interesting step and decided to donate some of the materials to various designers, architects, interior designers, to see if they could come up with anything interesting. And Ursula did a fabulous collection, now going into its third season because of its success. Sold through Selfridges in the UK, Ukes.com in Italy and worldwide. And you can, if you look closely, you can see that these are two of a much larger range of dresses. And they are all completely produced from recycled, recut up Speedo LZR racer suits and the fabric that was produced to make them. Christopher Rayburn, another English designer, he creates a men's and women's mostly outerwear collection from utilizing reappropriated military fabric, so not fashion textiles. He uses things like Swedish camouflage tank Tyvek, or 40-year-old army snowsuits, or Royal Air Force flying suits, Virgin Airways hot air balloons, and Eurostar train uniforms, and recycles them into a clothing collection. This particular piece was made from a parachute. These are pieces made from hot air balloons, I believe. He has 3 collections. Wool jacket collection, which is made from scraps of patchworked military battle dress from armies around the world. He does a jacket and coat collection made from Virgin Airways hot air balloons and military parachutes, of which these are 2 pieces. And then he does a 3rd collection, which is hoodies and parkas made from dead-line British milled cotton, so end-of-line dead stock. Another one of my personal favorite designers at the moment, Meyer Peace Collection. They're a German line based out of Berlin, and Christine Meyer works with recycled, mostly vintage materials. So the pieces that you see here are actually made from domestic textiles, home textiles, tablecloths, curtains, couch material, all sorts of things. Also, a couple of her pieces. The one on the left is made from repurposed military dead stock, and the one on the right from recycled denim jeans. And these last 2 pieces are probably what she's best known for, which is working with vintage flour sacks. These are flour sacks from the mid-1800s. So you can see the names of the farmer printed on there. They're replete with holes and stains and all sorts of things. I'm wearing one, so I can assure you it does have holes, but they're very beautiful, and it's part of this connection to material, that the material is what we have lost our connection to in fast fashion. But there is a story there, and a very valuable and important one. She also donates a portion of her profits go to charities in Nepal and India, children's charities. KMA, another Austrian label. There's some very interesting things happening in Austria at the moment in eco-design. They consistently utilize non-traditional and discarded end-of-life materials. So things like roofing paper, postal shipping bags, prison blankets, windsurf sails, and decommissioned parachutes. 2 pieces here are made from tiny, tiny scraps of recycled cotton t-shirts. This is part of their prison blanket collection. They're made from Austrian prisoners' blankets, where the prisoners actually wove and used the blankets in prison before them being discarded, and she has a collection of men's and women's jackets out of them. So again, that connection to the material and the history that it brings with it is quite tangible in her pieces. Also, from KMA, the piece on the left, you can probably tell, is made from a parachute. So as is some of the pieces on the piece on the right. She's very much a performance artist as well as a designer, so she doesn't take part in traditional fashion shows. She does installations and performance events mostly. Too many people ask me, is eco-fashion a trend? This is not a trend. This is a necessity. Sustainable, ecological means of doing business is not an option, it's a requirement. Designers have the responsibility to learn from each other, to design smarter and more responsibly, to ensure the sustainability and longevity of our industry, but also for our planet. And my part in that future is to honor and to communicate the groundbreaking and cutting-edge work of those designers. Thank you.